The Raiders have their next head coach. What's up? This is Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff. Klint Kubiak is coming to Vegas after the Super Bowl. The Golden Knights, still confusing. Are they good or bad? Who's the best goalie? What's going on with this team? The A's are spending a little bit of money, and UNLV lost another game big. Tom Brady actually did it. Here we go. Klint Kubiak is going to be the Raiders' next head coach. It won't be officially announced until after the Super Bowl because he's got a coach in the Super Bowl. They can't announce it. If you remember last year, Kellen Moore got the New Orleans Saints head coaching job. He had been the Eagles offensive coordinator. They waited until after the Super Bowl, 2 days after the Super Bowl, to actually announce it. So it'll still be another week or so, but the Raiders are going to hire Klint Kubiak according to anybody that's reporting on this. And the Raiders did the right thing. It has been a while since you can say the Raiders have done things competently as an NFL organization. But if you look at the month of December, when they effectively tanked to get the number 1 pick in the NFL draft, and now the hiring of Klint Kubiak, it has been 2 big wins for the Raiders just as far as process goes, right? Klint Kubiak might not be any good. We'll find that out. But as far as process goes, the Raiders have done things right in the last few months. Landing the number 1 pick made them a more attractive job, and then going out and getting an offensive-minded head coach was the way to go. Because what this organization should do, and what I think they are going to do, is pair Klint Kubiak with Fernando Mendoza and just let them be, right? Let them develop together. Mark Davis needs to leave it alone. Mark Davis needs to step back and say, all right, at least 3 years. At least 3 years, you two just show us what you got. We're not going to judge you harshly on year 1. We're not going to judge you too harshly on year 2. And then year 3, that might be when we actually turn some expectations on. That should be how the organization views this over the next few years. Obviously, if it's like 0-17 in back-to-back years, that might change it. But as long as it's not just a complete disaster, give them 3 years and then start making real judgments. Mark Davis just needs to leave it alone, because the entire goal of the organization should be years 3, 4, and 5 of Fernando Mendoza's rookie contract. Those should be the years that you're planning to be in legitimate contention. Not necessarily sitting and saying, hey, we need to win the Super Bowl or we're going to win the Super Bowl, but can you be legitimate contenders? You don't control your own division, so like winning the division might be difficult because Patrick Mahomes still exists, but those are the years that you should be legitimately in contention for winning playoff games and going to a Super Bowl. Years 3, 4, and 5 of Fernando Mendoza's rookie contract. That should be the goal. So Mark Davis just needs to let it go, let it grow. Don't get obsessed with winning in 2026 or 2027. Let Kubiak and Mendoza pair up for a few years before we start. What we can judge them, but before we start making decisions or moves about the future and what's going to happen, right? Mendoza and the number 1 pick, it gives the Raiders a chance to get that really good quarterback. If things go well for the Raiders, you get the head coach and the quarterback paired together. He's the play caller, and you have them for a decade, more than a decade, right? Like, and if you look back to what the Raiders have had over the last 2 decades of football, how many times have they had a good quarterback, right? There were some good Derek Carr years in there. I'm not going to sit here and tell you Derek Carr never had good seasons, but Derek Carr was not like this top of the league quarterback, save for 13, 14 games one season. Right? And even that, he wasn't, nobody thought, oh, Derek Carr, this is going to be the guy in the league for a few years. So it's really been 20 years of almost nothing. And similarly for play callers, John Gruden maybe was going to be good at it. Josh McDaniels appears to be very good at it when he's not the head coach, but they just haven't had this. And they might. Mendoza and now Kubiak give you that chance. So let it happen, because if it works, this is how you become a really good team year in and year out for 7 years in a row or longer if they're actually awesome at this. Now, a couple of things on this outside of just making the right type of hire. Again, I don't know how good Kubiak is, but it's the right type of hire. I want to read this tweet from Jeremy Fowler because I found this fascinating and screaming of, oh, I wonder who told you that. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN tweeted out, one thing I was told about Klint Kubiak and Las Vegas is that he and minority owner Tom Brady very much hit it off in the initial interview. Both are all ball, a source said. He was able to create momentum with his initial interview, and that carried into this week. Whatever the hell create momentum means. The funny part on this, to me, is giving Tom Brady credit for his influence on Klint Kubiak. Because what exactly did Klint Kubiak choose? He chose to be the head coach of the Raiders. And what exactly did he choose to not be? To stay as the offensive coordinator of the Seahawks? Or to take the Cardinals head coaching job, who do not have the number one pick and are probably moving on from Kyler Murray? Like, the idea that the Raiders needed Tom Brady's influence to convince Kubiak to take the Raiders head coaching job, a big raise and a promotion over staying in Seattle, is kind of hilarious. Like, let's be clear. The Raiders landed Klint Kubiak because they have the number one pick in the draft and Fernando Mendoza is going to be there. They didn't land Klint Kubiak because Tom Brady's this great recruiter that everybody wants to work with. If that was the case, Ben Johnson would be the head coach of the Raiders because that's who Brady wanted last year. But guess what the Raiders didn't have? The number one pick in the draft or a quarterback. Now they have the number one pick in the draft to get the quarterback, and all of a sudden, they're a more attractive spot. So, like, this idea that, oh, Brady really locked this up. Who was the competition? The Arizona Cardinals? Like, if it's just, hey, Brady makes the Raiders a little bit better than the Cardinals, congrats. Like, that's not really a whole lot to be happy about. And that's why I say, like, oh, who could have leaked that? This Tom Brady and Kubiak really hit it off there. I can't imagine who would want to be pumping up how important Tom Brady actually is. Because again, good job. Like, had they landed John Harbaugh, you might say, oh, wow, they got Harbaugh. But no, they got an offensive coordinator who was choosing between staying as the offensive coordinator or becoming a head coach. Now, on Klint Kubiak, and I know I covered this a little bit last week, but I want to go over it again now that he's going to be the head coach. And this is sort of the question, because I don't know the answer to this, but how convinced are you that Klint Kubiak is this great offensive mind? Because you're hiring Klint Kubiak because you're hoping he's the next McVay or Shanahan or that type of coach that takes the quarterback and is really, really good, can build an offense and create an offense and call an offense that's awesome. How convinced are you that he's that good? Right? And obviously, you're not going to be 100% convinced. That would be foolish. But, like, do you think it's greater than 50-50? Is it a 75% chance he's that good? Are you pessimistic? Is it 25%? Because here's the interesting part about it. Klint Kubiak has been an offensive coordinator for exactly 3 seasons. And it's been 3 different NFL teams, right? 2021, he was in Minnesota. 2024, he was in New Orleans. 2025, he was in Seattle. He's only had 1 offense in the top 10. And it was this year in Seattle. Obviously, they're very good. And, like, New Orleans had Derek Carr and then some Spencer Rattler in there. Like, I don't think there was any expectation that New Orleans was going to be good when he was the offensive coordinator there. But, like, Minnesota had Kirk Cousins, and they were middle of the road. They were 17th in EPA, 14th in points when he was there. But the offense got much better the year after he left with Kirk Cousins still there. So it's like, I guess the point is, there's not a lot of evidence that Klint Kubiak is actually this great play caller. This season is really the only evidence. It's the only season that he's had where you would say, oh, we want to make him the head coach. Because you could have hired him to have been the head coach last year, right? He was the Saints offensive coordinator and then took an offensive coordinator job with the Seahawks. I'm sure if an NFL team had been like, oh, we think that guy's really smart, we want him to be our head coach, he would have taken it last year. And nobody thought Klint Kubiak, right? The Raiders could have hired him instead of Pete Carroll, and they didn't do that. So, they were very good this year, and I'm not saying he can't be good, but it's just like we're basing this off of this one season. And I think what the real problem is that this offseason, when it comes to head coaching candidates, as far as resumes go, this is just a bad offseason to be hiring a head coach, right? Obviously, John Harbaugh was the big one, and he got hired very quickly by the Giants. But Who was the second best candidate this offseason? It might be Kubiak, right? Like it genuinely might be, because I don't love like hiring Robert Saleh. Jesse Mentor, like decent track record, very similar, I would say, to Klint Kubiak, though there's some college in there as well. But I don't like the idea of hiring a defensive-minded coach. Kevin Stefanski's probably the other guy that I would say is like, oh, that's probably number two. Of all the guys that got hired, if you're the Raiders, I think Stefanski's the only one I'd look at and say, I might have rather had him, right? Otherwise, all these other candidates, it's like, okay. Like, I wouldn't have wanted Harbaugh because that would have felt like, oh, we're hiring Pete Carroll 2.0. He's a little bit younger, but we're doing the same thing. So I just don't feel like this was a great offseason for hiring a coach. I mean, hell, the Steelers hired Mike McCarthy. Anything you need to look at and say, oh, this was a bad offseason to hire a coach, the Pittsburgh Steelers hired Mike McCarthy, right? That's how bad this was. So Kubiak doesn't really have this like, oh, yeah, that's clearly a great track record. He's going to be good. But you're trying to hit on him before it's obvious he's going to be really good. So, yes, you make the hire now. I think they should have hired Klint Kubiak, but I'm not, to go back to my original question, I don't even know that I'm at 50-50 convinced that he's going to be a great offensive play caller and it's going to work, just because what's the evidence that it will? And, guys get hired to be offensive minds a lot, and it doesn't actually work out. The other side of this, at least from open jobs, was the Cardinals. Did they think they were getting Klint Kubiak? Because Klint Kubiak interviewed with the Raiders and the Cardinals over the weekend and then took the Raiders job, right? And now the Cardinals have pivoted and they're hiring Mike LaFleur, who's the Rams offensive coordinator. But like, was there any reason to think that Kubiak was actually going to take the job, the Cardinals job, over the Raiders job? I guess you don't say, no, we're hiring somebody else until Kubiak actually tells you no. But it just seems like nobody thought that was a realistic chance that he'd go to Arizona. I thought it was like potential that he would stay in Seattle, but not that he would take the Cardinals job over the Raiders. What are they doing at quarterback? Right? Kyler Murray is probably leaving, and that's probably better than if he comes back. And then what happens there? You try to keep Jacoby Brissett? It's just like, that's not a great situation to walk into. With the Raiders, there is, or there should be, a very clear timeline with a quarterback you're drafting number one overall of a couple of years. Also, on the idea of bad head coaching cycle and guys without good resumes, the Cardinals hired Mike LaFleur, and LaFleur's history is Jets offensive coordinator for 2 years. And to be fair to him, Zach Wilson was the quarterback, but they were bottom 10 offensively both of those years. Like, there's nothing there to point to and be like, yeah, there's some proof of concept. And then he goes to the Rams, and like, they were the best offense in the league this year, but he's been there for 3 years. But like, are we giving him credit for that? Like, that's Sean McVay. And so this is why I like the Eric Bieniemy stuff in Kansas City, right? He's the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs for 5-6 years with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And their offense is great. He can't get a head coaching job, though. And everybody's like, well, yeah, obviously, it's Andy Reid's offense. Why the hell is Mike LaFleur getting hired? Like, that's not his offense. That's Sean McVay's. I don't know. It's just very strange to me that we're giving Mike LaFleur the head coaching job when Eric Bieniemy couldn't have gotten one in very similar conditions, where it's like, yeah, well, the head coach is the guy who's obviously responsible for all of this. One other question on this that we'll see if we actually hear anything about it, but does anything that's happened in the last couple of days impact Max Crosby's likelihood of being a Raider next year? We've heard from Crosby once this offseason. He was asked about the coaching search and if the team was talking to him about it, and he said they weren't. He said he hadn't talked to the team at all since the season had ended. Does that mean he's unhappy with this or the process? Does either of that matter? I don't know. I'll say this: the Raiders should not have involved Max Crosby in the process, right? I think that's a good way to go about it, is to not call up Crosby and say, what do you think we should do? But what does this mean, if anything at all, to Crosby staying? Is he going to be excited about it and want to be a Raider? Or are the Raiders going to try to trade him regardless of what Crosby wants, and it's irrelevant? We'll get more into this probably after the Super Bowl. I guess we might get some reports before, but that'd be surprising if they really want to keep things under wraps. But what's Klint Kubiak doing at defensive coordinator? That's going to be the most important position. I've seen people tweet about, oh, maybe he'll take Seattle's defensive coordinator because that's Mike McDonald's defense. So if he comes here, it'd be his defense as the defensive coordinator here, and that's in theory a better thing. But is that actually a better job, right? Like, it's a worse defense yeah, you get to call it, but it's a worse talented defense. I think one problem the Raiders are going to run into with defensive coordinator is if I were a candidate for defensive coordinator, I'd be looking at this and I'd be concerned, right? First off, the defensive talent is not good. It's not good. Max Crosby, obviously the best player on the defense, might get traded, right? That's a clear number one question I'm asking is what's the plan there, which would make the talent worse. The first overall pick is going to be used on a quarterback, right? It's not going to help me as a defensive coordinator. And this is me guessing, assuming, but I'm assuming that round 2, 3, 4, at least one of those picks, maybe multiple picks, the Raiders are going to take offensive linemen, or maybe they're going to spend money in free agency on offensive linemen and potentially a wide receiver, right? Because those are the things the offense needs. You've now hired the offensive-minded head coach. You're bringing in the rookie quarterback. You want that environment to be as good as possible. And if you, like, the Raiders obviously need a better wide receiver, probably more than one, but at least one better wide receiver. And they need what? I mean, in theory, 4 new starting offensive linemen, but at least 2 for this upcoming season. And over the next couple of years, it might be 4. But they're clearly going to invest on offense. And how much are you actually going to get invested into your defense in year 1? Probably not a lot. And so those would be my concerns if I was a defensive coordinator candidate for the Raiders job, is just like, what am I actually coaching next year? Because it might be a very untalented side of the ball that I just can't do anything with.
Battle Blast, been serving Las Vegas since June 2012 with the very best in family entertainment. We are proud to provide the best facility, equipment, and service possible. Strap on laser tag vests, step into the 5,600 square foot 2-story arena designed to look like a worn, torn city street. An exciting atmosphere filled with exhilarating music, blacklight effects, and fog. Battle Blast also features a viewing deck for those not playing can watch players vest up and catch a view of the action going on in the arena. In between games, check out our arcade and prize center and enjoy tasty treats from our snack bar. Birthday parties, sports teams, group outings, and corporate events. Battle Blast does it all. We want to make your Battle Blast experience so good you'll want to return again and again. Battle Blast is the ultimate destination for family fun and friendly competition.
Bischoff's Briefs is brought to you by Battle Blast Las Vegas, the best laser tag in Vegas. Battle Blast is the best spot for your next event. Whether it's your kid's birthday party, a corporate event, your own birthday, whatever it is, Battle Blast Las Vegas is where you should go. Do it for your birthday. Get your friends, your family together to see who is better at laser tag at Battle Blast Las Vegas. Plus, there's arcades, arcade games, prizes. It's more than just laser tag. Battle Blast Las Vegas, located at 8125 West Sahara Avenue, your next stop for fun in Vegas. The Golden Knights lost again last night, this time in Anaheim, by a final score of 4-3, which means the Golden Knights have now lost 7 of their last 8 games. Coming off their 7-game win streak, they've dropped 7 of 8. And yet again, the Golden Knights fell behind by multiple goals early and had to try to come back to win it, or at least get a loser point. They're usually pretty good at that. But they fell behind 3-0. Got within 3-2 in the third period, gave up an empty net goal, ended up losing 4-3. If you go back to their game against Seattle on Saturday, they fell behind 2-0, tied that game at 2-2, but then lost 3-2 in the third. And then go back on Thursday. They fell behind 4-1 to Dallas, tied that game at 4, but then lost in a shootout. It's the same game over and over, right? The only question is, do the Golden Knights score late to force overtime and at least get 1 point out of it? They haven't done it the last 2 games. I found it interesting that Bruce Cassidy has talked about how he showed video in between periods for what he thinks is the first time in his career. He's frustrated with how they're playing in front of their own net, basically calling his team too weak in front of the net, right? He's clearly frustrated. And I would say, overall, if you presented to me, hey, team's losing a lot of games and they're falling behind, but then they have these big comebacks and sometimes they get enough to get a loser point, sometimes they just fall short and lose by 1. But overall, it's a team that's still pretty good. I'd probably tell you it's an anomaly, right? That yeah, we're seeing them score the goals late. Like where the goals are scored in the game is probably an anomaly. But it keeps happening, and it's happened a lot this season. It's not just in this stretch. It keeps happening that even though it does feel like a statistical anomaly, it doesn't watching it. It feels like, oh, this is kind of who this team is. Now, one of the interesting parts of this, and this is probably a bad thing for the Golden Knights, is most teams in the NHL are better when losing by multiple goals in the third period. The Golden Knights have taken this to an extreme because they're doing it so often and they're very good at scoring when they're down multiple goals. But most teams, when they're losing by multiple goals, are better because they're shooting more. They're getting more scoring chances. They're taking more risks. It's such a normal phenomenon that Natural Stat Trick, a place that tracks NHL stats and NHL advanced stats, they have an adjustment. They have a score. It's called score and venue adjustment that adjusts numbers based on what the expectation is for when a team is winning or when a team is losing late. Because if you're winning late, what do? You're not trying to score. I know Sinbin.Vegas tweeted about teams don't forecheck when they're beating the Golden Knights by 2 or 3 goals late in the game, which allows the Golden Knights to keep possession, right? Maybe they don't get into the offensive zone, but they have possession and the other team is not going to create a lot of chances. Generally speaking, teams don't shoot as much when they are winning by multiple goals in the third period. And because there's less before check, because there's less shooting, there's not really these long offensive zone shifts either. You're also not usually drawing very many penalties. So it's a normal phenomenon to be better late in games when you're down multiple goals. The thing is, the Golden Knights have been really good at it, right? Like they've been awesome at actually getting these goals and getting these games back because most teams don't actually pull these games back for anything, let alone a win. The Golden Knights are very good at getting that loser point back. The problem, though, is why are they falling behind so often? Is that the anomaly, right? Is that where it's like, oh, well, yeah, okay, you're going to give up 3 goals, 4 goals in a lot of games, but they're not all going to come in the first period like they have been against the Golden Knights. That's the part that's like, is that an anomaly or is that an actual problem, right? And all the good stuff that happens is because the other teams kind of stop playing normal hockey. That's the question here that I don't know the answer to. And part of the reason why I keep asking this year is this team any good because they have a lot of overtime games. They play every game close. And now we're seeing this extreme of early in the game, they're awful. Late in the game, they're great. You put it together and it's kind of like, well, that's an average performance. So are they any good? We're still asking that question. But NHL standings or Pacific Division standings, after this losing stretch here, 7 of 8 and 5 straight losses, especially not getting loser points in the last 2 losses, it's very tight again. The Golden Knights and the Oilers are tied with 64 points. Now, Edmonton has played 1 more game, so the Golden Knights have a better record. They're still technically in first place in the Pacific Division. But now, Seattle and Anaheim have 61 points. They are very, very close. LA and Utah are tied for the last wild card spot. So one would be in the playoffs and one would be out of the playoffs. They're only 4 points back of the Golden Knights right now. I think the Golden Knights are better than all of those teams, except maybe Edmonton, right? Maybe Edmonton's better, but I still think the Golden Knights are better than all of the other teams in the Pacific Division. But they've put themselves in a spot where the margin for error is almost gone. And if they play a couple more games before the Olympic break, but after the Olympic break here, like any stretch where they like lose 4 or 5, especially if there's no loser points involved, somebody's going to catch up. And you better hope like 3 teams don't catch up because this isn't just about like, oh, can they hold on the Pacific Division? Like it's close enough to where it's like, are they going to get dragged into a real playoff race, playoff position race? Not just are you the 2 or the 3 in the Pacific, like in or out. They won 7 in a row and created some separation. And I thought at the time, I was like, all right, that's the separation they need. They'll kind of cruise, right? It's not going to be easy, but it'll be fairly a cruise going into the playoffs, and we'll see if Edmonton catches them. But because of this recent stretch, now they're right back to where they were before the 7-game losing or winning streak, where it's like, okay, if you lose 5 in a row again, you're going to be in some trouble. Edmonton's probably going to pass you for the division, and these other teams that are on the outside are going to be within like a point of. So that's the issue now, is that the margin for error is almost gone, and they are, including these 2 games before the Olympics. After the Olympic break, they're probably going to need to rip off a really good run to sort of give them that comfort, give them that edge that they've had for most of the season, at least the last few months, on the Pacific Division. Now, specifically in this sort of bad stretch, most of it's come with Rasmus Andersson making his debut and through his first, 6 games now for the Golden Knights. Since he's joined the team, Golden Knights have been outscored 7-5 with him on the ice. The expected goal rate is 45%, which is second worst of any Golden Knights defenseman. Only Jeremy Lauzon is worse in this stretch of games, so that's good. He does have the most shot attempts on the team since he joined the team at 5-on-5 at 17. He has a goal and he has an assist. So the shots and the goal and the assist, like that seems fine. But I think the big issue here is Rasmus Andersson has been getting the most offensive zone faceoffs of any Golden Knights defenseman. He's being put into the best offensive situation possible and the fewest amount of defensive situations for Bruce Cassidy. And despite that, they're still getting outscored when he's on the ice at 5-on-5. And their expected goal says, yeah, this is right. They're giving up more good chances than they are creating when he's on the ice. So you're turning these good offensive situations into more chances and more goals for your opponent. That's not good. Now, I do feel like this is hey, give him time to adjust and he'll be better. Right? I feel like that's a genuine answer to what's going to happen. But 2 parts to that. How much time? Olympic break is coming. So he's not going to get much experience with the Golden Knights after these next 2 games for the rest of February. And then they come back from the Olympic break, and it's I think 25 games, something like that. 25 games left in the season after the Olympics. Does he need 20 games to get going? Is it going to start clicking those last 2 weeks of the season? Does he need 40 and it's not going to start clicking until next year? Does he only need 10 more and we see it towards the end of the regular season? Like, how much time does it take for him to sort of get up to speed? And also probably important, how much time does it take for Cassidy to trust him in some more defensive zone situations? Or does that never happen, right? Also, how much better does he get? Because the overall numbers right now, he's a below average defenseman. Does he only get to average? Because if he only gets to average, then that's not going to be good enough. Or does he get to, oh yeah, this is why the Golden Knights gave up multiple assets to get him. He's a really good defenseman. So those are the 2 questions. How much time and how much better does he get? Because I think he's going to get better. I think it's going to be, hey, give it some time. I just don't know how much time and how much better it ends up getting. Now, also on the Golden Knights, they're going to play in the Stadium Series in Dallas next season at Cowboys Stadium. It feels less cool when you're the away team, right? Like you kind of have to lean into the other team's city or whatever theme they're going with. But John reached out to me on Twitter to tell me this. He said, VGK's playing in Dallas in the Stadium Series in a dome. What are we even doing here? What happened to games outdoor at Wrigley, Boston, even the Lake Tahoe game was awesome. It does seem to kind of defeat the purpose of making the game look cool, right? Like part of the point is like, oh yeah, it looks cool because we're playing hockey outside, right? It's pond hockey. Or doing it at a historic venue like Wrigley, or doing it at just like a cool sort of, hey, didn't think we could do this, like the Lake Tahoe. Very weird place to play it, but it was cool. So it does defeat that purpose. But I feel like the NHL just kind of wants a game where they can sell 60,000 tickets, right? And it looks different. It's an event. 60,000 people come to watch it. And who cares if it's not outside? So yeah, it won't look as cool, but I think that's what the NHL is going for. And I would assume, unless Mark Davis is going to try to charge too much in rent, we'll eventually see one here at Allegiant Stadium, right? I can't imagine why we wouldn't, right? If they're going to put one in Dallas, why wouldn't we see one here? Unless they really try to do like, let's play on the strip, which would be the coolest. But yeah, I assume we're going to have one in the Allegiant Stadium at some point in the future. Our soon-to-be Las Vegas A's made another signing, Jacob Wilson. They signed him to a 7-year deal worth $70 million. The A's bought out Jacob Wilson out of pre-arbitration and his arbitration years. If you don't follow baseball salaries, basically, Major League Baseball players can't become free agents until they've played 6 years in the majors. And you go through 3 years of pre-arbitration where you get the league minimum, and then 3 years of arbitration where your salary is dependent upon how good you are. The team and the players submit a number every single year for how much they think the player should be paid, and they either agree or they go to arbitration where they decide how much the player should be paid. But it's 6 years before free agency. And you'll see contracts like this where it's kind of long-term, but the dollar amount isn't very high because teams are buying those players out of those 6 years, or in this case, 5 years for Jacob Wilson. Because had they not done this over the next 5 years, Jacob Wilson probably would have made like $30 to $40 million in the next 5 seasons. Instead, the A's are going to pay him $50 million over the next 5 seasons and hope that 6th and 7th year on the deal, when he would be a free agent and signing a bigger contract, that he's better than a $10 million a year per player. So there's a few interesting parts to this. First off, lockout salary cap seems to be coming, right? If salaries keep going up and there's no salary cap, $10 million per year on Jacob Wilson, even when he's 29 and 30, it's probably a great deal, right? It's hard for that to be a bad deal if there's no salary cap and salaries are going to keep going up. But what does this league look like with the salary cap? 10 million shouldn't be too big of a problem, though we are talking about John Fisher. But does a salary cap mean that 10 million could prevent them from adding a different player in the future? What this league looks like with a cap is going to be interesting to see in how owners actually treat it. Second, the A's have now bought out quite a few players from arbitration. Lawrence Butler got a 7-year deal. Brent Rooker got a 5-year deal. Tyler Soderstrom just got an 8-year deal, right? Those are now 4 guys, throw Jacob Wilson in there, that have been extended by the A's and sort of given these long-term deals. On their own, none of those deals are likely to be terrible, right? They're just not big enough dollar amounts to be like, oh my God, I can't believe you're paying that guy $12, $14 million a year. But again, 4 of them in place. If 2 of them go wrong, now we're talking about, you got $20 million and the players aren't helping you win and there's a salary cap in play. That's problematic, right? But the other part is like, how good are those players in 3 years when they come to Vegas? Because I'd give you this one. Nick Kurtz was the A's best player last year. When does he get one of these deals? But Nick Kurtz in 117 games had a WAR, wins above replacement, of 5.4. Soderstrom, Rooker, Butler, and Wilson Soderstrom, Rooker, Butler, and Wilson all played more games than Kurtz and had a lower WAR. Butler was at 1.9, Rooker was at 2.3, which is fine, but those are not great seasons, right? Kurtz was awesome. He's the one they need to lock up, right? Can they afford that? He might be too expensive for it because the other guys are like, oh, cool, you're going to be $10 million a year. That's great. Nick Kurtz, after his first season, is probably looking at this saying, when I hit free agency, I'm going to be making $40 million a year. I'm not giving away that to let you buy me out of arbitration unless you give me a lot of money. So sign Nick Kurtz to one of these extensions, and then we'll be talking. In the WNBA, the players and the owners are going to meet today in New York. There's a story at ESPN about this. If you haven't been paying attention, there is no CBA in the WNBA right now. So there's no season. I know they announced the schedule, but like there's not going to be a season until they agree to a new collective bargaining agreement. Team owners are supposed to be there. At least that's what some of the players have said. Multiple members of the WNBA's Players Association executive team, like Kelsey Plum, will be there. The ESPN story on this said that the Players Association submitted a proposal a month ago, and the league just didn't respond to it because, quote, they didn't think it warranted a response since it wasn't that different from past ones the union has submitted. So the Players Association gave them a proposal, and the owner said, "We've seen this before, don't care." Now they're going to sit down and meet. So how does that go? I know there's some quotes from some of the players in that story at ESPN, like Kelsey Plum, like Brandon Stewart, that are kind of like, hey, talking face-to-face could lead to a lot more productive discussions, right? And maybe it's a lot easier to come to agreements on things or meet in the middle on things if you're face-to-face, or they all get pissed at each other and or even further away. So I'm really curious to see sort of what happens after these meetings if we, at the very least, get a little bit more positive comments from players. Owners aren't really saying much, but from players about when they think this could happen. Also in the NFL, I did want to get to this one. The Vikings fired their general manager last Friday, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, who had been there for the previous 4 seasons. And I don't care too much about like whether he deserved to be fired or not. Unless the owner said something funny about like, oh, he chose JJ McCarthy over Sam Darnold. So that's why he fired him. Then I'd find that interesting. But the Vikings let Adolfo-Mensah do an end-of-season press conference on January 13th and then fired him 17 days later. He went to the Senior Bowl last week, and then they fired him on Friday. The owner, Ziggy Will, said that they did a deep dive. They didn't want to rush into a decision. So they did a deep dive to make sure that they made the right choice in terms of firing him or retaining him. He also said it was solely an ownership decision. So all of that sounds better than like the Bills, for example, firing their head coach, Sean McDermott, because the owner saw players crying in the locker room, right? Like the idea of, hey, we did a deep dive sounds good. The only question I have on it is this. When did the owner think about firing the GM, and when did that deep dive start? Because again, he gave a press conference. Adolfo-Mensah gave a press conference and then got fired 17 days later. Did they do a 2.5 week deep dive? Because kind of feels like the owner thought about firing his GM like a week or two after the season started and then was like, all right, I need to dig in on this, and spent 5 days or had somebody else spend 5 days. Like, did it really take 20 days to decide to fire your GM after the season ended? That seems a little far-fetched. But again, I'd rather my owner come out and say, hey, we're doing a deep dive on this, than just come out and say, yeah, Josh Allen was sobbing in the locker room and it took him a minute to acknowledge my existence, so I fired the head coach. Bischoff's Briefs is brought to you by Battle Blast Las Vegas, the best laser tag in Vegas. Host your next birthday party at Battle Blast. Book party package and you'll get a private party room, dedicated host, pizza, soda, arcade tokens, and of course, laser tag. And if your kids are playing and you're like, that looks like a lot of fun, you can add on a game for adults or just book it for your own birthday. Battle Blast Las Vegas, located at 8125 West Sahara Avenue, your next stop for fun in Las Vegas. If you want to support me, check out my Patreon, patreon.com/technicallycorrect with Tyler Bischoff. There should be a link in the podcast or the YouTube description as well. But check out my Patreon if you want to support me. I'll have bonus content up there regularly. There's already a bunch of bonus content that's up there for you to go read or watch. So check me out on Patreon for a little bit more support. UNLV got blown out by Nevada on Friday. They ended up, the final score was 13, but it felt worse than that. Right? They were down by 10 for pretty much the entirety of the second half. There was never really a moment in the second half where you thought they were going to win the game. And it means we've got back-to-back bad performances by UNLV. I've been using the Bart Torvik sort of game score thing here and a way to look at UNLV and sort of what they have been doing. If you remember, they had the horrendous performance against Wyoming. They got a 5 on the game score, right? It was terrible. But since that game, UNLV had been playing better, right? They had 5 straight games of improvement, capping it off with that game against Utah State at 98, right? But since then, they've now played 2 bad games in a row. They had another terrible performance against New Mexico. They got a 5, and this one against Nevada got a 41. So Josh Pastner's used the word roller coaster quite a bit the last week or so to describe the season, which is a fair way to describe it. As bad as they've been, but also they've had good wins. There have been good moments. But it's interesting they can't sort of stabilize, right? Like that, I think, is a big problem, is that this team can't stabilize good play. There was a couple weeks there where it looked like they might be doing so. It looked like we might get at least a baseline average performance out of them on a regular basis with a few really good games, but now the last two have both been bad. And what does that actually mean? I think a lot of it has to do with the roster. The players simply aren't good enough to do that on a regular basis. That there's talent there, but it's not enough to consistently be good. You're also seeing the effects of no Tyron Jones for basically the entirety of the last two games, and then the foul trouble that comes for Emmanuel Stephan. What did he play in this game? I think it was 15 minutes and he fouled out. It's causing a lot of issues for this team. And roster construction obviously comes back to Josh Pastner and head coaching, right? Like that's a big deal. How much you want to blame the injuries, whatever. The roster's bad, and that's on Pastner, right? But this is where like I have a hard time figuring out like what exactly do we blame the coach for, right? Like I feel like I feel like coaches do deserve a lot of blame when there is this really inconsistent play, because obviously it's in there. There's good play in there, but they don't get it out of them every game. And this is where I don't know exactly what that criticism is or should be, right? Pastner deserves it, but what exactly is it? Is it a bad game plan going into each one of these? I don't think I know enough to say, hey, their game plan against Nevada was terrible, or their game plan against Utah State was perfect, right? Is it bad game planning? Is there something we don't see that's in practice or preparation? I don't know. But it does feel like there is blame to go for the coaching. I just don't know where exactly to specify it. Now, one of the interesting parts of this game, Naz Cunningham got some more playing time. 24 minutes, and he scored 13 points on 5 of 11 shooting. He should be playing more. Now, again, Tyron Jones hasn't played the last two games, and there's obvious foul problems with Emmanuel Stephan and Kamani Hamilton, so there's more minutes there. But he's, in theory, going to get some more minutes, regardless of who's healthy and everything, because he's been scoring when he's on the floor. But I think there's two big problems, right? First off, he is not very good on defense. I think the way I'd phrase it is he appears to be the most absent-minded defender on the floor. And the one play to highlight that was Kamani Hamilton went up for a layup. Kamani Hamilton got his shot blocked and fell down. There was some contact. Wasn't a foul, but he fell down. He's on the ground. Nevada pushes the ball up quickly. It's a 5-on-4. Kamani Hamilton is late to get back in the play because he got knocked over. Kamani Hamilton's man just runs straight down the paint, gets a pass, and lays it in. Naz Cunningham was the defender that should have been in position to slide over and at least stop a free layup, right? It's a bad situation. You're probably going to give up a kick-out three, but he just didn't move. He just did not come over to help, and they give up the free layup because I just don't think he was aware that that's what he should have been doing. It was a very weird scenario. My teammate's laying down over there. Oh, I should help take away the layup, right? He's not a very good defensive player. The other part of Naz Cunningham is on offense. He gets his shots up, but I don't think he takes good shots. And the sample size is pretty small because he hasn't played a whole lot, but he just takes any shot. And he made enough of them in this game to be like, oh yeah, we should play this guy more, because he was 5 of 11 from the floor with 13 points, and that's better than pretty much anybody not named Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, right? But they're not always good shots. However, I would say this UNLV team, especially in the last two games, has had some significant stretches where they struggle to get any shot up, where they're struggling to get good shots. And so Naz Cunningham can help alleviate that, because as much as I hate mid-range jumpers, a mid-range jumper is better than a turnover, right? An open mid-range jumper is better than some off-the-dribble fall-away three-pointer, right? So it's not the worst thing in the world when the offense is going through some struggles, and this offense doesn't have a lot of shot creators. Dre Gibbs Lawhorn is one. He's the best one on the team. Kamani Hamilton does it sometimes, but outside of that, that's kind of it. There's not really other shot creators on this team. Naz Cunningham is. So they're not always going to be the best shots, but they're better than no shots a lot of the times. We had another game, by the way, where UNLV's offense struggled to finish at the rim or just get to the paint. They really struggled in the first half to get to the paint. And second half, there were some more, but they still finished 11 of 21 on layups and dunks. And by the way, they were 5 of 13 before like the last, 7-8 minutes of that game. So very bad at getting to the rim and then also just bad at finishing. So they lose this game to Nevada. It's not great. I do have to highlight one good thing though, because I will highlight it when it's wrong. I got to highlight it when it's good. UNLV went 2 for 1 at the end of the first half. They did it. They actually went at 2 for 1. They got the ball. They went and scored. They got a defensive stop that came back down. They didn't score on the second possession, but they got a 2 for 1. They got 2 possessions. Their opponent got 1. I'm going to assume they did it on purpose and it didn't happen by accident, but they actually went 2 for 1 at the first half. So good job for UNLV in that one. What does it mean going forward? I don't know. Is this team any good? No. Is this team terrible? Sometimes, but also no. Like we've seen it. They're clearly not terrible. So what does it mean going forward? They're a team that's gonna, if anything's gonna mean anything from this season for the team, it's gonna be about winning 4 games in 4 days in the Mountain West tournament, and we have not seen consistent enough play to assume that will happen. Right? It's just they can beat anybody in this conference, especially in the Mountain West tournament, but they're probably not going to do it 4 days in a row. For the rest of the season, I think the bigger part is which of these individual players are going to be back next year, and which ones do you want back, and which ones want to come back. That matters as well. But that's probably the bigger part, is building at least some sort of a foundation with a handful of these players so that you're not completely starting over this offseason with a brand new roster. Can you find a way to keep a few guys so that you have, even if they end up being your 6th, 7th, and 8th best players, it's probably best case scenario, you still want some sort of core. Now, there's one other thing in college basketball I want to talk about, and that is Amari Bailey. He is the player that played a season at UCLA, entered the NBA, has played 10 games in the NBA, and is now trying to come back and play college basketball. He is only 21 years old. He's hired an attorney to try to get eligible. This has caused quite the uproar in college basketball. Just the idea that Amari Bailey could get eligible and play college basketball. And I will say this. Generally speaking, it doesn't feel right. Player goes and plays in the NBA, comes back and plays in college basketball. I agree with the general sentiment that it doesn't feel right. But the more I thought about it, the more I'm confused by my own feelings and the general sentiment from everybody else. Because Charles Bediako played in the G League. That is a professional basketball league. He joined Alabama mid-season this year, and people aren't happy with it, but it's happening right now. Also, UNLV has Walter Brown on the team. Walter Brown played professional basketball in New Zealand and is now playing college basketball for UNLV. Tomislav Buljan is one of New Mexico's best players. He played professional basketball in, I believe it was Croatia, and now he is playing college basketball. There are tons of guys playing college basketball this year that played professional basketball somewhere, all over the world, right? That eligibility has been opened up to where if you played professional basketball somewhere, it doesn't mean you're not eligible to come play college basketball. So the question is, why is 10 games in the NBA worse than multiple years in Croatia or New Zealand or the G League, right? Like, why is that where we're like, oh, we have to draw a line in the sand at 10 games in the NBA versus 3 years in Croatia? Right? That's sort of I think the logical flaw that I've run into with, like, why are my feelings different on that? And here's what I think the problem is in college basketball that I don't think a lot of us grasp yet. College basketball is the only basketball league in the world where guys are getting paid and it's not like an amateur thing. It's the only basketball league in the world where the teams aren't trying to get the best possible players. That is not the goal of college basketball teams. That has not been the goal of college basketball ever, is to get the best possible players in the world. The NBA's goal is to get the best players, period. They don't care where they're from, where they went to school or played before. They want the best possible players. That's the goal of the NBA. And all these other leagues, that's their goal as well. Now, they might have roster limits and how many foreigners you can add and all of that, but that's the goal of all of these leagues, is to have the best players they can get. And if right now, if you told a league in Serbia or New Zealand, hey, this guy played 10 games in the NBA. He's interested in playing for your team. He'd be your best player. They're taking him. But at the college basketball level, we're not doing that. And it's because we have what's changing and is skewed or whatever, this view that it's still amateurism, that it's still the student athlete, right? And that is not true anymore. Maybe it should be. I don't know. I don't know what college basketball should be, but that's not true for college basketball. It's not amateurism anymore. It's kind of student athlete, right? And so it's this league where it's like you have to. We're trying to draw a line on what's the highest possible level of player we want to see play college basketball. That's what we're trying to do. And so we're fine if somebody played in Croatia because we don't know if Croatia's basketball league is any good. But we're not fine if it's the NBA because we know the NBA is really good. And I know with Amari Bailey, he was at UCLA, he went pro and is coming back, right? Again, Croatia wouldn't care if a guy played in their league, went over and played 10 games in the NBA and was like, wow, I'm not good enough, and came back. But college basketball does. And it's because as a sport, it's not trying to get the best players. And that's never really been what it's about. But now you can have guys that have played professionally. So it's this weird place that the sport is in. And I don't know what the answer to it is. Because should Amari Bailey be playing in college basketball? Probably not. But why? Why can Walter Brown play but not Amari Bailey? I don't know. Josh Pastner said it. I think it was Mountain West Media Days when I was still on the radio. He brought up the idea of like making it an age restriction where like college basketball is U22 or U24, whatever it would be, right? Obviously, Amari Bailey's 21, so he'd be good to go under either of those. But like, that's an interesting thing where we see that with international competitions, right? There's youth tournaments, there's a youth World Cup and whatever. The Olympics for soccer is U21 and you get 3 exceptions, right? So like there's already in place across the world youth restrictions. We do it all through sports when you're growing up, right? So maybe that's the answer. You say, hey, it's U24 or 22, whatever number you want to put on it. It's U24 and whatever. You played 10 games in the NBA when you were 21. Cool, you're back, right? Like maybe that's the answer. And I don't know, but it's just college basketball is in a really weird space where there are a lot of professional basketball leagues that have players at the same level that college basketball is. And we have to figure out what's okay and what's not okay for these guys as far as eligibility goes. And it's worse. It's more confusing than football because there aren't these other leagues. There's not people in Croatia playing football at the same level as college football. Generally speaking, it's college football and the NFL. That's the career progression, and there's no reason to want to come back. So, but in basketball, there is, right? I go pro, I'm not good enough. Okay, I'm going to come back, right? Think of it as a baseball player who gets promoted to Major League Baseball. Guess what? You weren't good enough to go back to AAA, right? Like that's what happens. You don't say no to the AAA guy at AAA level because, oh, he played 10 games in the majors. We can't have him anymore. So it's just this weird place that college basketball is in, and trying to define amateurism and the student athlete with the players now getting paid makes it very, very difficult. But this has been Technically Correct. I am Tyler Bischoff. Thank you so much for tuning in.